So welcome to those who just arrived. The next conversation is going to be a roundtable that will be moderated by Christina Contandriopoulos, and I will introduce Christina and she will introduce her speakers. So Christina Contandriopoulos is professor at the Université du Québec à Montréal, where she teaches the history of design, architecture, and cities. She holds a master's degree and a PhD in architectural history, and she has also taught at the Université de Montréal and at McGill University School of Architecture. Her research focuses on women's writing, public space, utopia, and cartography. The roundtable, and she's also the director of the research on art and architecture in the 19th century. So the roundtable is called Emotion. No, sorry, wrong location. Oops. There will be a lot of emotion anyway, but it's called Réflexions on the Montreal Scene. And please join me in welcoming Christina and her guests.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is working. Thank you very much for this, and thank you for the initial invitation of Louise and Vanessa and Fabienne and Katarina to work on this great project of the exhibition and symposium. And thank you to my guests today. It's a great honor to have you and to talk about the local scene. Thank you also, Carla Hemlock, for this very moving lecture. It was a great way for us to start the day. I'll start by introducing everyone here, and then in order, Édith-Anne will present some of her work, followed by I can't remember, Michaëlle, and then Berirouche. So, starting with Édith-Anne. Édith-Anne is a specialist. She's also my colleague, professor of art history in the Department of Art History here at UQAM. She's a specialist in modernism in Quebec and Canada, and she's interested in the historiography and the transcultural and transnational logics that run through the field of art and thus participate in an epistemological decentering. Her most recent project, une géographie des réseaux de production et de diffusion de la fibre, so a geography of the networks of production and diffusion of fiber in modern art and contemporary art in Quebec. She's thus well placed to try to understand a kind of historical view of textile production here in Quebec. It's in line with critical theories of androcentric and colonial normative frameworks, and she has published a tremendous amount of papers and books. I'll move to Berirouche. Berirouche Feddal is of Kabyle origin. I have to say he's one of the only male in this symposium today and exhibit, and he also celebrates the work of women because he will speak mostly of the work of his grandmother. And he explores a diverse range of themes through his artistic practice, including African popular culture, fetishism, African utopia, mythical and religious traces, decolonial studies, and his own migration. As a transdisciplinary artist, he employs various mediums from print to performance to delve into history, identity, and human culture. His artistic approach encourages contemplation on the complexity of identity within the diaspora, questioning his position amid a continually evolving cultural heritage. And he's a graduate from Concordia, and he also has won great amounts of prizes, and I won't name them all, but you can find them on the website. Michaëlle Sergile is an artist and independent curator, working mainly on archives, including texts and works from the post-colonial period from 1950 to today. Her artistic work aims to understand and rewrite the history of Black communities and more specifically of women or communities living in diverse intersections through weaving. Often perceived as a medium of craftsmanship and categorized as feminine, the artist uses the lexicon of weaving to question the relationships of gender and race. And she has exhibited in many places, including the Musée National des Beaux-Arts, and then again, she has done a great amount of things that you can look on at the website. And we will start then, one of the themes that we will have in common is I am impressed and moved by the way each piece of textile has a deep narrative quality. And this was very powerful in the talk by Carla, and it's also true, I know, in your work, and it's one of the aspects that has interested Édith-Anne. And we'll start with you, because you will help us put the local scene in a longer historical perspective of textile history here in Quebec. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I'll try to do that. So thank you so much for inviting me, Christina and the team. It's a very beautiful event. I'm really pleased to meet you all. Thank you, Carla, for your beautiful presentation. I'd like to first, shortly, but just explain how I came to be interested in textile as an art historian. So it's a personal story. So when I was really little, my mother used to sew a lot. I come from a very modest environment, so she was working all day and then coming home and then sewing. And she was very inventive and did a lot of work. And I remember her studio was installed in a wardrobe, garde-robe. So it was, so I was fascinated by her work, and at the same time, I was really sad because she was working so hard. And she died very early, young age by cancer. So she didn't pass on that knowledge. So that was my first encounter with textile. Then when I was a graduate student, a master's student, I came to be involved with the milieu here at the time in the 90s with the Galerie Diagonale. Diagonale was at the time the mandate of it's a run center gallery, and the mandate was specifically to show textile. And it was the end of a very glorious period, in fact. And after that was a decline. But I came to be involved, and I published a few papers and participated in a few conferences. And then I did something else. As you probably know, in the 90s and the beginning of the 20s, like textile in art, contemporary art was in decline. It was not in fashion. It was not at all. So I did something else. And then during the pandemic, being at home in a domestic environment, I said, I want to do something. I wanted to do a project research on textile. And one of my main questions, and it is my question of research, one of the main questions of research is, how do textile invite us to reframe art history? Because there's a lot of other disciplines. And here in Quebec, you have art history, and you have what we call the métier d'art, the craft. And it's really two codes, two systems, two network of exhibition places and things like that. So my question was, how do textile invite us to reframe art history, its foundation, because we know that art history is a modernist project. So how does it reframe it methodologically? Does it invite us to rethink our methodology? And how does it shape epistemology? Because we know that feminist studies did study textile and material studies as well, but art history, not that much.
Not yet.
Not yet. So we're trying to do something about it. So this is my main research question, and so far I've collected a lot of data. I'm not finished, so I do have observation, but not a fixed answer. But I do have intuition. So I'm going to explain briefly the project. So I decided to look at three moments or three periods. The first, so because I'm specialized in modern art this period, I started with a period beginning in the late 40s and then going on in the 50s and the 60s, where there's a renewal for tapestry. So, specifically in the École des Beaux-Arts du Québec, Fine Arts School of Quebec, rarely translated, where there was a workshop of tapestry. In fact, it was an offshoot of the program because the École des Beaux-Arts in Montreal and in Quebec were founded in the beginning of the 20s, and they were modeled on European models. So sculpture, paintings, etc. were the models. But there was a lot of consideration for how to bridge art and industry as well. And within that preoccupation, there were classes called Art du Tissu. If I translate, it would be
Fiber.
it would be fiber art, and that was in the 40s. But it was an offshoot of the program. But within the school, there was a studio run by Jeanne d'Arc-Corriveau. And then and a lot of students came out from there, and there was really a renewal for tapestry. We do know people like Mariette Rousseau-Vermette studied in l'École des Beaux-Arts du Québec, whereas Micheline Beauchemin, the two iconic new tapestry artists in the 50s, 60s, and the 70s, she studied in Montreal. But there's a lot of other women that are not known at all, like Denise Baudin, Karine Boileau, Jeanne d'Arc-Corriveau. We know her name, but we don't know anything about her. Jean Bastien. Jean Bastien was the first professor of tapestry in the tradition of Aubusson and Gobelin, but Jean Bastien is a one-tat. So there's a lot of transcultural lens that we can study from a transcultural lens. So that's the first period. The second period that I'm looking at is from the 80s to the mid-90s, end of the 90s, where in Quebec, some women, and some men, but majority of women, decided to put on a Conseil des Arts Textiles du Québec, so a textile council. And they were very active. At the same time, there was a Biennale de l'Art Textile du Québec, a lot of artists, and they really reach out internationally. So there was a very climax period in the new tapestry, but it opened up not only to tapestry, but fiber art. It is within the international context of fiber art. So I'm looking at that moment. Who is there? Where do they exhibit? In which condition? What is the dialogue with métier d'art? And the third period, finally, is the contemporary period, and I'm there. I'm starting that period, really. And then how do contemporary artists use textile or fiber in a very large understanding of fiber? It could be optical fiber as well. So there's a lot of example, but I won't, because we have two artists, contemporary artists here, so I won't talk a lot about that period, but I'm thinking about les fermières obsédées, who are using clothing as a satire of political correctness. I'm thinking about Georgia Volpe in Quebec, who is in Quebec City, who is from Brazil, and that's a wonderful project, very often grounded in different community. Hospital, psychiatric hospital, for example, local community, neighbor, and internationally. She does a tremendous, very interesting work. But there's also all these other trends, computerized and interactive clothing, and this fabulous work that's going on in Concordia University. So the main objective is to question how to reframe art history, and the specific objective is to first map places where they produce and we exhibit the textile and fiber art, so the gallery system. The second specific objective is to look at undervalued artistic practice, and a lot of women among that. The second specific objective is to shake or destabilize the centrality of modernism. So I found out, as many of you probably did in your own area, a lot of missing in the analysis. What is missing a lot is analysis where we look at the intersection of gender, class, privilege, deprivation, geographical location, the intersection of those elements. what is missing as well is a genealogy of women. Art history has been built and constructed upon a genealogy of men, and even though feminist studies study that a lot, we do have to establish a genealogy of women in textile. And most of it, I think, is trying to understand how textile weave together different stories, and we had a very good demonstration of that by Carla. I'm thinking, for example, as well of Caroline Monet, an Anishinaabe artist, who used in one of her projects sealed strips where she mixed geometric patterns inspired by a birch bidding technique, for example. So how do we bridge tradition and contemporary sensitivities? And as well, so on and so on. I don't know how I'm doing with timing. I'm going to conclude. Okay. So a few observations. How do textile reframe art history? I have two ideas. One is I think that textiles calls for a transcultural lens. Textile, we can say that of other objects as well, but textile, specifically textile, I think is deeply embedded in personal and collective stories, values, epistemologies. So we have to look at how does it work, and how the dynamics of transaction between cultures, but between personal and collective stories as well, is embedded. And so this is very different from thinking about art history and object in context. It's art history, it's object within a transcultural dynamics, which is quite different. And the other observation, I think, is to shift art history from an individual artistic paradigm, the genius artist, to a collective or collaborative. Carla, you were saying earlier that you quilt alone, and it's true. There's a lot of individual investment in it, but there's very often a collaborative or collective effort. And just one example, and it's going to be my last, and I'm going back to the 40s. In the École des Beaux-Arts du Québec, there were women who were executing tapestry cartons. Can you say that in English? Carton de tapisserie. And when you see it exhibit now in the Musée National des Beaux-Arts du Québec, it is written Alfred Belland, because Alfred Belland, the painter, drew cartons, and Thérèse Lafrance and Monique Mercier, who executants. But in fact, it's not true. It's not true at all, because here in Quebec, it was not like Aubusson, where there was a specific carton, which you have really specific, there you have to use that technique, that color. There was not that. It was just a drawing. So all the inventivity, the agentivity of the person who do the tapestry is like, so in fact, in short, it's a collaborative effort. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Michaëlle, you have some slides to show us some of your work.
I don't know, should I go there or?
Yeah, maybe.
So my name is Michaëlle. As you can see, I'm a textile artist. I wanted to talk about, well, I really appreciated what Édith-Anne said because I felt like there was a lot of connections of things that I'm going to say here. So my first encounter with textile was actually an accident, because I had a conversation with friends, and I was so stubborn into translating the book Peau Noire Masque Blanc, which is Black Skin, White Mask, from Frantz Fanon, which is one of the founders of the post-colonial studies. And I wanted to rewrite the whole book in French, but in inclusive language. Because for me, even though it was a book written in 1952, and we studied it a lot in sociology, I felt like there were some things that were missed in terms of inclusion, in terms of representing women equally. And I decided to just stop rewriting the book because I didn't know where it would go, and instead to think about the book itself as a weaving. And for me, when you look at a text, it really looks like the horizontal phrase, like all the sentences, they kind of look like threads for me. And I pushed it a little bit more with conversations I had with friends, and in French we do say words like tissu social or métissage, which is literally social fabric, or métissage is not a word I can really translate, but it would be like the mixture of culture. We can say it like that. But I felt like there was a strong connection with textile and the words that we use to represent or identify people from their culture. And for me, it was interesting to use this book as the starting point and archives in general to then work with textile. So that's precisely what I said here. And so the work I did, which is all these fabrics, all these pieces are actually a chapter in the book, and I decided to code the book instead of rewriting it, which is kind of rewriting the book still, but instead of writing with my hand, I would really weave each sentence. And it was for me a critique that was kind of instinctive, because I used brown and beige threads for the horizontal threads, and I used black and white threads for the the opposite, sorry. The vertical was brown and beige, and the horizontal were black and white, because we often say to identify people that this person is black or this person is white, which is actually wrong. We're never white or black, we're always shades of brown and beige, and that's why I did kind of a counter discourse where all the threads that were vertical, that were supporting the pieces, were actually the colors that I feel like we actually are. And it was an idea of the museum to add the mirror, which I really enjoyed, because I felt like people could, when they would come close to the piece, then they would see themselves and they would actually understand the concept behind the idea of color and the critique behind the colors and the words that we use when we talk about each other. And I'm gonna jump into another work that I did. So like I said, I'm really interested in textile, the lexicon of textile, and the lexicon of the words that we use to talk about identity. And this is, for those who don't know, it's James Baldwin. He's an Afro-American poet and writer. He did a lot of work that actually really helped Black communities in the US, but also Black communities in general, because his work was really powerful, and I felt like he was one of the first people who actually mixed political to art, and in a way that was really interesting. He's someone that I feel like he's really, he gestures a lot when he talks. I kind of do the same thing, but he's way more powerful. And for me, it was to ask myself the question, how can I talk about a leader? Like, how do we define a leader? What constitutes a leader? And I started thinking about James Baldwin because of the way he talks. And this is a jacquard weaving, for those who knows. And I presented it as a really big installation where we could see a video from James Baldwin's interview with the Dick Cavett show in 1968. I might be wrong, but it's in the 60s. And it was an interview that he was talking with another professor, and they were talking about the differences between Black communities and white communities. And the professor was saying, why are you focusing on that? Because the fact that you're focusing on that, you're actually creating distance between the communities. But then James replied, the goal is not to create distance, but it's to actually acknowledge the fact that there is a difference in terms of representation, a difference in terms of how people is being treated. And it was really a powerful moment during that interview, because I felt like, for me, this interview really showed me that he is a leader, in the sense, the way he sat, and then the way he pauses, and the silences sometimes when he would just listen to someone and just look at them. And I felt like we could see in his presence that he was a leader. And that's why I really wanted to show a video, but also have stills of him making some movements and creating like the continuation of the image, but through tufting. And I do like textile because I feel like textile is, like you mentioned before, is a medium that we tend to, like, we don't see it as beaux-arts. We didn't see it as beaux-arts for a while. And I felt like the idea for me to work with archives is to work with things that are in the margins and then put them in the center. While textile is kind of the same thing for me. I really want to use a medium that I feel like is not acknowledged the way it should be and put it in the middle and put it in the center. And I felt like it was so strong to do it at that time, even though I realized when I went to Senegal with Berirouche that there's textile everywhere when we move outside of here. There's a lot of textile, but here there's a lot of textile too. I just feel like in Senegal, we acknowledged it so well, but I'm just hoping, I know there's a lot of talented artists, so I'm just hoping we'll see them a bit more. Lastly, I don't want to take too much time. I did a work with on the Union United Church and with the Union United Church, which is, for those who knows a bit from Montreal or who knows Montreal, it's located in Little Burgundy. It's close to the Métro Lionel-Gros, and it's one of the, well, it is now, it's the oldest institution representing Black communities in Montreal. It was founded in 1907, and it was with a lot of porters. So we have a big history of porters in Montreal, and a lot of porters and their wives created what we know now as the Union United Church. And I wanted to focus, as usual, on what we don't talk about, which were women. And all these women were the first collective of Black women founded in 1902, and they all helped created the Union United Church. And I felt like when I discovered the Union United Church and I had conversations with people at the church, then I knew, okay, there was this reverend, which was a man, which is great, and we talked about men, and then I asked, okay, but where were the women? Like, what did they do? Did they contribute? And they talked about the Colored Women's Club. And the Colored Women's Club was really a club dedicated to welcoming new migrants, new families, and find institutions for them, found grants and financial support. And I wanted to use these images, but create kind of a, how do you say that? Like a connection, but a circle, an installation where you see a circle, because the thing with archives that we have to understand is we have limitations with what we find, and we can't be the ones just inventing things. And I didn't want to start working on these women and not understanding the power of each other in their position. So I decided to just create kind of a circle or a semicircle where we could see them being all equal instead of having a hierarchy. And that's where I continued working, and I presented it. It's not the greatest image, but I presented it at Plein Sud exhibition. And I only have 4 photos now, 4 weavings, because these images are very old, and it's difficult to find originals. It's difficult to find an image that is not neat, but that is not pixelized. Because the technique with jacquard weaving is that you work with an image, or you work with a pattern, you work with something. And for my case, working with an image, if the image is too pixelized, then it's really difficult to weave it. And I don't want to completely défigurer, to completely, how do you say that? Disfigured is the same word, well. I don't want to disfigure the person, and I want to acknowledge them properly, and I want them, their families, to be able to say, oh yes, this is Martha, this is, you know. I'm gonna go fast. I just wanted to acknowledge that Dorothy Williams is a really, really important woman who really helped understanding Black history, Black Canadian history. And I used, well, this image, which was also at the church. And it's an image that Nancy Oliver Mackenzie, the person who helped me understand the church, she showed me. and she actually told me that they had no names for this photo. So they had to identify each children with a number and ask everyone at the church to come and identify them. And for me, as much as textile can be an oral passing from one person to another, from a community to another, I felt like this was as strong because it's also the idea of orality and the idea of community where people from the church would come and just say, I remember this person, it's this cousin, or it's my mom's best friend, and they would just write their names, and I felt like it was really powerful to see how through community you can retrieve history. And so that's me. That's a really blurry photo of me weaving it. And it looked like this by the end. I really wanted to have it as kind of a framed photo. And I wanted people to be able to go around it because there's also this idea of having the other side when it's a weaving with one weft. It's usually the negative, and it really felt like an old photographic piece. Yeah, exactly. So that's it. I presented it together because it's obviously connected, and I'm still working on it. I'm inviting you all, if you're still in Montreal or if you're living in Montreal, to come to the Maker Museum. I'll be still talking about them because I feel like we don't talk about them enough. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was great.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah. And you also have a presentation, right?
I also have a
Somewhere?
presentation. Not as good as yours. It's like photos. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm not used to mornings conference. So my name is Berirouche Feddal, as you can see also on the PowerPoint. Let me just take the mic. Yes. There you go. So I wanted to introduce you, also my person, but also my origin, to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So Berirouche Feddal is my family name and my pronoun. And but in Kabylia, where I'm born, it's different language. It's Tifina and also an Arabic world, which is in Algeria. So I wanted to introduce you how it is different as it is pronounced, but also as my identity has complexity. So this is the letter of Tifina on the left, which is the native language I have, and this is the Arabic letter that is predominant in the Algerian territory. So to make sure that everyone, where is it? So next to Morocco, next to Tunisia, Mauritania, and I am from Alger, where I was like living as a young, but I am also from the mountain, which is the Kabylia mountain. I don't know if there is, but yeah. So to make sure that it's up in the mountain in Algeria. So to make sure everyone, it's the red dot, Kabyl. So everyone to understand a native person from Algeria. We from Amazigh people, so from these Canaries to Egypt. There is, and from Mauritania also, Tuareg. So many people are native in North Africa. So I'm part of them. So to make sure that everyone sees Alger la Blanche, but also the mountain, and also where it is the difference between the mountain town and also the Alger town. Very a big difference. And yeah, of course, an introduction about like various inspiration of life. Mohamed Essiakham, which is a painter I love, that my father introduced me when I was young, who talks about communal time, but also about how religion have been, actually he was born and he found a grenade when he was young, and he lost an arm by finding it because it exploded, and he started to paint and he started to create history of Algeria we know now. And I wanted to very emphasize Baya artists. Baya have been also one of my biggest inspiration. She had an exhibition at Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris that have been recognized also as a woman that has inspired Henri Matisse, that had inspired Picasso, that they give back also like this kind of acknowledgement, late acknowledgement, but thankfully they acknowledge her. And beautiful, amazing exhibition. And of course, manifestation also is part of my person, but also as a statement of a person that that is not gonna give up onto his language, onto his culture. So I'm very like proud of being Kabyle. Yeah, again, Bea, amazing color, amazing. She works on. I'm presenting a lot of inspiration because it's important. Bea have been also like creating women in their moment of joy, where we can see and not see a lot in our community and represented around the world, where they can sing, where they can chant, when they get gathered together, and also with beautiful color dresses, as you can see in my work represented. So grandmother on the left with her best friend, you can see the powerful colors, the powerful blue, the powerful smiles. And this is like where I live in Algeria. This is my home, where my father built for my grandmother. And also, the road to go to Algeria in the mountain. So I'm from a family where there is a little room inside where now the aunties are doing sewing, where everyone is gathering to help my aunties to make clothes. Where also, it's a video, but it's a part of my grandmother swag, let's say it like that. Yeah, she's very powerful colors, mixing together patterns. We can see crocodile, fake sandals, blue socks, and orange. There's so much beautiful colors getting together. And so I brought some elements of, so you can pass, and you can see how it's, exactly. That's much better. Yeah, thank you. So thanks. And so throughout the time, and as you did, I've been involved in seeing my grandmother sewing, making rugs, making all fiber art in general. And at that time in 2019, when I came back to Algeria before pandemic, I really understood that it was important through all the women community that weaving, also making clothes are important to our culture, period. So in general, we see, this is one of the last, it's a best friend of my grandmother. It's the last woman in the village that does rug right now. She's the last one. And she's very impressive, and I went to make a film about fiber. So this is one of the capture of my movie I'm preparing. It's a long process making a movie. So and on the left is a basket that throughout the 80s the women started to do. So this is an important moment of the women Kabyle, 70s and 80s, because petrochemia, which is gas, have been evolved into around the world. The gas, as we know, have been important into the globalization, but also as a woman in Kabylia, they found a strategic plan to play with it, which is recycling. So they decided to cut through plastic to make clothes, to make rugs. There is a rug in passing, right with the woman in the back. It's made of plastic and also fiber. So there is various elements of playing with petrochemia, but also longevity of thinking. They see as something that it doesn't destroy, but then instead they make out of it something that is last long. So it's very interesting process. And this is an artwork that I made out of a plastic bag. This is representing my grandmother doing the Hasef, which is counting 100 prayers to be next to God, and her little key on her knees, next to her knees. And this is like a bag that my grandfather actually brought me, because I asked him to brought me fiber, specific fiber that I will show you, and he brought me this fiber in this bag. And I found it very like from the souk, which is like the market, and I found it very like something that is seductive, because it's supreme, it's plastic, it's fake. There is something between the fake that I love in my practice and authenticity, not authentic. fiber. Grandmothers, we love grandmothers. So my grandmother in the middle on the left, and her cousins, her stepsisters, and one of the village, Fathay. So yeah, and you guys can see women wear a lot of colors, a lot of patterns, a lot of, as an everyday process in my eyes, I see so many elements, and it's just inspiration. It's just something that I cannot not see, you know? So, part of the life. And after that, I decided to pay homage to my grandmother after she died in 2021. So she died of fibrose pulmonaire, which is like something that it goes with the lung. So as you can understand, making rugs can make you. Oh my God! Did you hear me in the back? Okay, cool. I didn't have the microphone. So she died from lungs because a lot of dust from the rugs. So through time, ça l'a rattrapé. So I wanted to pay homage to textile, but also pay homage to the 70s and the 80s because it's the plastic time. And the plastic time have been also important in Quebec, also with the plastician artists. François Sullivan, part of it. We can see line, we can see geometry, we can see so many elements that we're not acknowledging because it's textile made to an everyday basis. But as we see it as something pictorial, there is something seductive, there is something pictorial, period. And I wanted to play around the time of those rugs, especially. I wanted to see the phase. I want to see when she make a rug and the time comes to it, she started to sew another rug on top of it. So, and the rug in distribution with the lines is the rug of her prayer, when she prayed. So yeah, very interesting moment of petrochimia in Algeria. And in my work in general, this is in 2020. It's printed fiber on polyester. It's called Les Fidèles ne se sacrifient plus, which is an exhibition that I was making also about my grandmother, but also about myself being sacrificed as in history of the Ancient Testament with Abraham and Isaac, where the father comes and say to his son, I need to sacrifice you, and the son accepts. And on the top of the mountain, Angel Gabriel comes and he say, you don't need to sacrifice him, you proved enough. And there is this kind of like, where my father was about to sacrifice me, which is like a long story, I will not start, and he decided to not. And this is like an proof of courage. And the printed fiber, I don't know, it's like very abstract, but it's sheep that are being sacrificed because from that time, Ancient Testament, Quran also have been the lastest religion in the world, monotheist, but also inspired from the sacrifice, where now we have the Eid, where we sacrifice a sheep. So from that time of Andrew Gabriel and Abraham and Isaac, there is this kind of like sun that is there. And this printed fiber, it's actually when I was in Morocco, I was seeing decapitated head of sheep, and I took photographs and I decided to print those sheep. As you can see, it's very abstract, but it's literally decapitated head. And from the top, it's une véritable bombe à retardement, which is a printed fiber on the floor. Now it's framed and collected, but I wanted to present it on the floor because there is something that is in the market. We see a lot of gas bomb retardement, which is like you circle the souk, but there is like literally gas that can explode. That happened in Lebanon. So it's really something that I wanted to make aware in my practice through gas, but also through polyester, because it's polyester printed. So yeah, souk. We love souk. We love souk. We love like interesting moment of where people gather, where people try to buy sheep, try to buy anything that is possible in the souk. you can find many things, trust me. And so yeah, and sur le bord de la plage, un souk en feu, there's also a practice of also fiber, where on the corners of the painting, we see a fiber of decoration of the dresses. There is some people have the fiber where you see like whether it's ornament around the dresses, and this is part of like where this is like my grandmother collected. When she died, we decided to actually to make her, as a tradition, to make her more next to God, let's say it like that, is we need to give the most possible thing possible. So we take everything and we donate. But I didn't wanna. I was part of the only one who didn't want to give away some things. So I collected a lot and I started to use them in my practice in general. So yeah, and fiber again. And this is the cardoon that is in the bag that I told you previously, where my father, I told him to bring me from Algeria, because when he went to the graving of my mother, it was a very trick time because of pandemic, but also I'm an artist, and then it was a trick time also of the Hirak, which is like the protest moment of Algeria, so I couldn't go because I could have been arrested through the borders, so it was a very trick time. So I asked him to bring me this cardoon because I wanted to play about homage into women, because there is this woman, I will go fast, this woman that is very important, which is Fatma and Soumer. Fatma and Soumer have been misunderstood in history because she's a dancer in the Folie Bergère, this woman. It's called La Belle Fatma, but in history of our time, they confuse her as the warrior Fatma and Soumer because they have the same name, Fatma, so they use as her face from this dancer and from the woman that is a warrior, where photo didn't exist. So there is this kind of like intersection between those two heads. That's why there is like this two ponytails where two women are connected, but not in a sense of what they're supposed to have as identity. So yeah, and it's printed fiber under it, which is the rugs of my grandmother. I printed it on top, on polyester. So it creates this kind of like distortion of like, is it a rug, is it not? And yeah. So yeah, last and not least, men. So I started to do a lot of fiber silk jacquard. I love jacquard dévoré, which is like something that is give me seduction when I went to textile stores, and I wanted to pay homage of this kind of complexity of this fiber. I wanted to literally trick the eye of the spectator, where I start to paint the painting fully and I start to recover the painting around fiber, where it gives me this kind of like hiding space, hiding images that history does that. It hides. It hides like some secrets. We don't know everything from history, and this fiber is like perfect because I love to play around mediums, and this medium have been a perfect sense to. It's a long series. I will not explain the series, but you can see, as you can see, inability to manage our feeling. This is the French flag revisited it, which is I subtracted the red because the red is about violence and army. I wanted to pay homage on something new, something coming, something new generation, because I was inspired by my little cousin. My little cousin started Sorbonne in art, and I saw her in intersection and multiculturality, that she wanted to be French, but also be that person, that woman of feminism, but also sorcererly. Anyway, it's a very interesting, big, important work. But anyway, it's very long to explain. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was a really moving and beautiful talks, and there's so many. There's a great dialogue between your two processes and interests. One of them is obviously the mediatic transfer You're interested in textile, but also textile inspires, your work in archives, and then transfers from photography to digital jacquard to painting, and this quality that is a media transfer is very strong, which is obviously one of the trends we see also in many of the works that are downstairs in the exhibition rooms, where textile expands. It's hard to understand the limits of textile. What is textile design, really, between these works that are at the margins of art, of craft, but some of them are almost bacterial, some of them are fiber, some of them are almost like images, and there's this immense range of practices. Now it brings me to a question that is coming from your 3 presentations, and you said, Édith-Anne, starting, textile practices, how do textile practices make us think of, how did you phrase it, frame art history, or reframe art history, which is, I kept on thinking about that, listening to you, and thinking also of the title of our symposium, Textile Beyond Craft, and you are both interested in textile practices as a marginalized, you said that word, marginalized practice, or an art that hasn't been recognized and yet is ubiquitous, is everywhere, is extremely present, and it's a dominating industry and economy, but it's also, so it has been marginalized, it is everywhere, it's also a craft. And I'm wondering, listening to you, this desire we have to bring back the memories of craft women or of different people who have been makers and bring their names or bring their story forward. And I'm wondering, is this necessary? Do we have to go beyond craft? And I'm interested because I also think that in the gesture, in craft, there is sometimes no name for an artist, and yet the gesture is there. There is a healing quality also in making that is present, obviously, in your practices, because it allows you to tell your own personal story or stories of migrations. And I'm wondering, sometimes can craft or making exist just as making? Or do we have to go beyond?
I think we need to legitimize it. I think we need to process a legitimate talking on those women and those artists that have been forgetting into history. And as Edith was saying, so many people were involved as a community and been forgotten. And I think we need to legitimize it as in history so we can create to our future artists coming have references, have also possibility of, I can do that also. I can be also a fiber artist and be recognized in any museum, in any institution, in any cooperative. I feel like we need legitimize it. Something like that. So yeah, I think this is the process we need to do as historian of art, is to write about it and to make sure that no one is forgotten. Yeah.
There is that from my point of view, but my concern is not that much the dichotomy between métier d'art and artistry, because it exists anyway. Mm-hmm. It's two professions, two codes, there are systems, and it's there, and it's going to stay there. So it's not that much to say, I have to prove that this is not craft. Not at all. It's more, so I'm not contesting the system, it exists. But it's how do textile, which penetrates artistry or art, reshape it, methodologically speaking and epistemologically speaking. So I'm calling for a real, well, it's very ambitious. I don't know if I'm gonna make it, but it's really to reshape it from a transcultural perspective and a collective perspective. Artistry has been written as a series of individual artists, individual genius, but feminist studies have deconstructed the idea of genius, but not so much as an individual artist. And I think textile calls for that, to at least question it. And I'm not saying that there is no individual work involved, of course there is, but it is very often driven from collaborative, or at least even in, as you prove it, both of you, your work is embedded in community. And I have to say, I'm not answering that question for now, but I want to say that at an emotional level, I was really touched by both presentation, because it makes me feel so good to see how much respect for those women, how much love for those women. Whereas in Quebec, and we saw it in the pandemic, elders in Quebec are elders, I'm not saying elders in Native community. We have a lot of lesson to learn. But elders are just like marginalized, pushed away. I mean, it's so sad. So it makes me feel really good to see how through art you are shaping values, societal values, not only art history, but values. So I wanted to say that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? And both for both of you, but Michaëlle, you talked about gesture, how gesture is important. You saw gesture as gesture embodies leadership. I wanted to ask both of you, how do you envision gesture in your own practice?
You're not the first person who asked me that question. I feel like I never have the proper answer, because I feel like especially when you work with textile, and in terms of community, textile is a really, really good medium, because you do have to have the help. Well, most of the time you need the help of someone, even just to warp the loom, even just to like help you with the count of threads, things like that. It's so much laborious that sometimes you need another hand, you need another person's help. So anyway, but in terms of gesture, in terms of embodiment, I don't know. I feel like the work I did with James Baldwin, where you see the continuation of the work of the image with tufting, that's when I actually started thinking about body and thinking about the gesture and thinking about how to create a piece, you involve your whole body, and it's a labor that you continue yet every day to just have one piece being made, because we don't see how laborious creating just one textile piece can be, because you do have a lot of process just to even be able to weave one thing. And I think there's something really interesting there, because it feels kind of like your body is also paying homage to the things that you will eventually tell through this weaving, because your body is making the same movement, almost like a ritual. It's the same movement continuously. And when I was weaving on the jacquard, every time Geneviève Moisan, which is a great artist and a great teacher, every time she would come and say, Michaëlle, take breaks. Michaëlle, sit down. Michaëlle, you're not forced to weave standing. You know, every 45 minutes, take a moment. And I'm like, no, it's okay, I'll continue. I feel like now it's going well. No, and I didn't want to stop, but I felt like it was almost kind of a ritual, because it's the same movement that you'll do maybe for 8 hours. And I had the help of the machine in a sense that the machine is still partly digital, but when you still do it completely manual, there's another labor, because then it's better to be sitting, but then your body's like this. I don't know, I feel like there's something very present, and any weavers will feel it because they know it. But yeah, I don't know if I answered properly.
Is there a link? Can we make a link with you? Like
A code, a barcode.
no, but talking about this investment of the body, and you talked about sacrifice.
Yes.
So how does that play in you?
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to also jump in the fact of community, just to finish that. I am part of a nice studio mates. I have Tristan Réel as a fashion designer, but also artist in my studio. I also have Elizabeth Perrault as a fiber artist in my studio, and Maya Gilmore also as a fiber paper making in the studio. So everyone has a machine, so everyone is like, so them also be a part of helping me seeing looking from the back. Oh, guys, come here. We need to look at the painting. Oh, guys, come here. We need to look at the print. What do you see? What do you feel? So this is also a part of the community of I cannot not say, like I cannot not acknowledge, but also part of my father, my grandmother, my aunties that also kept those rugs, bring me things from Algeria. So it's like a circle that to arrive to a certain product, let's say like that, an artwork, there is so much people involved, so much community. And gesture, are we talking about still gesture?
Last answer and then we'll have to...
Gesture and sacrifice. So gesture, as I said, back in step, always like taking time, always looking at if people, it's composition, you know, painting or any things, it's also about looking at the final in your head. Also at each time, even the last minute I'm changing, so it's like very back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I love that because I come back home and I'm like, I hate it. And I come back the day after and I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. So it was like about looking, for me as a gesture is like that. And for sacrifice is part of, I think, almost 80% of my work, because sacrifice of your mother, sacrifice of the parents, sacrifice of myself as being an Algerian, multi-territorial, sexually different, that is not approved in Algeria. So it's very like different status of sacrifice that I am part and I am embodying, and I embody in my work. So it's like a very intense process. And from the beginning of university, so many cries, so many tears, because you're involved in your own trauma. And when you're involved in your own trauma, it tricks you. It tricks you because you need to, what to show to the public. Because when you put something in the public, at the end, it's the public, your judge. It's the public who, what I feel like the worst that can happen to an artist is to be ignored. You can be loved, you can hate, but to be ignored and imprisoned, that's the two also for those who knows, is the worst feeling for an artist. So I feel like sacrifice is important, to sacrifice yourself and your story to public.
Thank you so much. That was great, and thank you for sharing your work and your stories and stories of your communities that you brought to this room today and shared with us. It's really wonderful. Do we have time for a last question from the audience? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can take
Okay,
time.
we'll take. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is there
one question?
is there one question? So thank you for not asking this way. We'll keep